So, no, don't do that yet. It's wonderful to be here and quite an honor. Folks on the right side, I'm not ignoring you. I used to be an anthropologist and used to teach, and I don't ever look to the right. So, 18 years of that, and yeah. So. Good, okay. So tonight I'm going to be talking about good works, which in Judaism we call gimilut chasadim, literally acquisition of mercies, but it's acquisition of mercies that we, the human beings, do. I'll get there in a moment. So obviously I'm coming from the Jewish tradition. So let me start by saying that I believe firmly that different people need their own paths to God. And when you're on one, it can feel like it's the only one. God whispers to many people in various times, places, and languages with as much variation as there are people in the world. And the Jewish system is one path, and even though it shares many important common roots with the Christian traditions of today, especially when you think about our shared texts, our shared beliefs, our shared God, we as modern Jews in what we call the rabbinic system, the system in which I'm ordained, we have to just start. We're an entirely different cultural and religious system. Here's why I'm saying that. Many, many times, you and I, Christians and Jews, and Muslims and Abrahamic faiths will use the same words to talk about entirely different concepts. But I think it's important to identify that. So this is a little bit of Judaism 101 that you'll get in the talk. And I hope that's okay. All right, good. All right. Because I think by being clear and curious together as communities, we can complete God's work in the world together, which in Judaism, in Hebrew, we call tikkun olam b'malchut shaddai, meaning to complete or repair the world according to the ideal of God's sovereignty in the universe. All right, let me give you a brief and funny, maybe funny, but startling example of these misconceptions that can happen if we don't realize we're using the same words differently. This year, a year ago at this time, that's how you say it, a year ago at this time, I was a lecturer at Xavier University in Ohio, a Catholic school, teaching Judaism 101, which had not been taught before, and we spent the whole semester talking, really intense text study. They did wonderful observations. They had a final essay. I broke the rules of the college, and I said, I really want this personal. I want to know where you are. And then we come to the great miscommunication, mea culpa, according to your tradition. Salach lanu ki chatanu, forgive us for we have made grievous errors in my tradition. The students heard the word salvation through their own Catholic upbringing, right? Which means getting right with God, right? It's between your soul and God. The world and God is last. It's for them, it was resolution of sin or removing the stain of original sin. What I never realized until I taught that class, so 43 years in Judaism, and I never realized when we Jews say salvation, Yeshua, that has nothing to do with an individual. We mean all the people of Israel, past, present, and future, and we mean that in a very temporal, earthly sense, from deliverance from worldly distress at the hands of other nations and people. That's a different concept, right? I missed the boat on this class, and I wrote an apology to the kids. So we're not going to do that tonight. Of course we are, but thank you for my detour. It's a path and it's a detour. All right. So we're here to come together. This is the Hebrew word shalom. We are all a community, and I'm honored to be here. All right. So let's get to the main question so that I can say what good works mean in Judaism and why we do them. Our topic tonight, what is the human being according to Jewish tradition? So the answer is a human being is three things. A living person is a unified body that consists of, two substances, and because of those two substances, the human mind. I'll get there. The point we start with is what we're building is a human being that's limited in horizon right? That's why, unlike God's mind, but also capable of great highs and lows of ethics and hope. These three things together, the body, the soul, and the mind, are blessed in this order each morning when we awake in the Jewish tradition. These three things taken together are the very cause, reason, and necessity for good works, gemilut chasadim, again, meaning how we acquire mercy in the world. All right. So in Judaism, we are a being of two substances. This is, no, not yet. This is the angels forming the Adam, the first human being's body. According to the Hebrew words, na'aseh Adam, let us make a human being. The first part of us is the physical part, our body, which comes from the earth ourselves. The Hebrew word for the first human being, Adam, comes from the substance of the earth, which is... No. Do you remember the word for earth? For the ground?
What?
Do you remember what Adam got his name for?
Earth.
Earth, Adamah, great.
Yes.
Good.
Adamah,
yes. I know. I won't do that again, I'm sorry. So we are humans entirely of this world. Our physical substance is entirely of this world. Each morning we bless the creation of the body. Blessed are you, Eternal One, our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human beings by means of wisdom and created within it numerous veins and openings. It is obvious and known before the presence of your glorious throne that if one of them were ruptured or if one of them were blocked, it would be impossible to exist and stand in your presence, even for but a moment. Baruch atah Adonai rofecho v'saro mafli la'asot. Blessed are you, Eternal One, who heals all flesh and performs wonders. So you see there's really two parts to this, right? The first part of the blessing up here is we're here to do work, right? We're here to do work to be able to be in God's presence. But what makes a human being, right, us, flesh and blood, different from other animate and inanimate things in the world? Okay? This is the soul. I'll get there in a minute. We call this in Hebrew the neshama, the soul that comes from God. The Hebrew word for soul in this case, neshama, means breath or breathing, okay? It refers to the vital life force that animates the clay of our bodies, that gives us sentience and conscience, and it connects us, and this is where we get a little bit different from Christianity, directly and inextricably to God, without mediation and without intervention. The soul is pure, and it is both untouched and untouchable by sin, by misdeed, evil intention, physical disease, or disfiguration. Judaism has no concept of original sin, rather, original and lasting internal purity. But here's where work comes in, from which we are estranged, it's our potential from which we estrange ourselves when we do sin, and from others to whom we are beholden and for whom we are responsible, whom we estrange and separate ourselves, right? But we are connected to God, and that part of us returns to God when we pass on. So this notion is the second thing. This is a medieval illustration of the breath of God coming from heaven. God's name has four letters: Yud He Vav He YHWH. We don't say that word in Hebrew, and this is entering the world from heaven. We bless this also each morning with the following blessing, which I'll chant for you just so you know what it's like. If that's all right to do? Okay. I don't know the rules in the church. Oh, no. There's always a rule. You know it when you break it. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi ata varata ata yitzarta ata nafachta bi v'ata meshemra b'kirbi kol hazman shaneshama b'kirbi modeh ani lefanecha Adonai Elohai v'Elohei avotai ribon kol hama'asim hadon kol haneshamot Baruch atah Adonai Hamachazir neshamot lepegarim metim. O my God, the soul which you have given me is pure. You created her, you shaped her, you breathed her into me, and you guard her within me. And you in future will pull her forth from me, and surely return her to me in the future which is to come after that. All the time that the soul is within me, I give thanks to you, Eternal One, my God and God of my ancestors, Lord of all creatures, Master of all souls. Blessed are you, Eternal One, in whose hand is the soul of all life and the spirit of all human flesh. Now I'm going to tell you a secret that you're going to know that most Jews don't know. In Judaism, the world is already okay and already holy. We bless a thing to take it and put it to human use, which is going to be corruptible. We're going to mess up over and over and over. We spent 40 years in the desert. We don't get it right away, right? Those of you who raise children, you know this, right? Okay, so we know this. So when we say these blessings, it makes it accessible to us. Why are we making the human soul, the part of God that sustains humans, other creatures? It's a little different, I'm not going to go there. But it sustains human beings and is God's immanent presence in the world, between and within us all, right? So we can put it to work, to get inspiration and motivation from it. The third thing that we do in the morning is not a blessing, it is study. We study Torah, which is both the scroll and wisdom. I'll say more about that in a minute. It's life experience, it's seeing things deeply spiritually. This is the framework, the heart of the Torah, which I'll also chant for you. This is the heart of the Torah from which we conduct ourselves. This is the right path, if you like to steal from Buddhism. This is, in Judaism, the halakha, the walking, the right way to go. Elu devarim she'ein lehem shior, sh'adam ochel pratehem b'olam hazeh, v'keren kayemet lo le'olam haba, ve'elu hein, kibud avaim ugemilut chasadim, ve'haskamat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'aravit, ve'hachnasat orchim uvikor cholim, ve'hachnasat kala uleviat hamet, v'yun tefila ve'havaat shalom, Bein Adam lechavero v'talmud Torah keneged kulam. These are the precepts, the fruit of which a person enjoys in this world, while the principal reward is preserved in the world to come. We don't know what that means, so please don't ask. That could be here and now, that could be heaven. If we have mysteries in Judaism, that's one of them. They are as follows: honoring one's father and mother, performing deeds of kindness, early attendance in the house of study, morning and evening, providing hospitality to guests, visiting the sick, participating in the making of a wedding, accompanying the dead to the grave, concentrating on the meaning of prayers and making peace between fellow people and between the married couple. And the study of Torah is equal to them all. So this is our orientation. This is the heart of the matter. Now we get to the problem, the crux, the crossroads, if you like, of human existence from the human perspective, according to Jewish theology, how we know God, anthropology, what we are as people. So I had to give you the 101 so this will make sense. So if Judaism teaches us that the soul is a spark of divinity, right, a little piece of God residing on earth in each of us, destined for reunion no matter what with its holy source after the last breath leaves us. And if you've ever been in the company of a creature or a person who died, as difficult it is, it's a very beautiful moment. You've heard the last breath. It shakes you, it is unmistakable. That, we believe in Judaism, is the return of the breath to God, of the neshama, the soul. So, if this is the case no matter what, where do things go awry? In other words, why do we need to focus on doing good deeds, right? Here's the problem. Free will. right? The domain of the human mind. The ideal world, the orderly world, we call it in Hebrew again, tikkun olam b'malchut shaddai, meaning God's ideal under God's sovereignty, that world as it should be was expressed for us in the Mishnah, which is part of our oral Torah. I'll say more about that in a moment. Not the written scroll, but the oral traditions and teachings. First written down in about 200 CE of the Christian era. So this is the quote. Simon the Righteous was one of the last men of the Great Assembly. This is the body that made religion and culture before the Rabbi showed up. He used to say, the world stands upon three things: the Torah, the temple service, and the practice of acts of piety. Three pillars hold up existence as we know it: social, theological, with God, spiritual, everything. Torah, deep wisdom; temple service, which now is prayer; and the practice of gemilut chasadim, these acts of piety. So just a little bit more 101. The Torah has two parts. That's my computer over there. The Torah has two parts, the oral and the written, and we had to write down the written one. So the written, you know, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the scroll, right? The ancient parts of the oral Torah were written down, the oral Torah, not the written, not the scroll. They were written down as imposed acts of necessity. The Romans showed up, and the Jews were among the last to be conquered because we're not good subjects of empires, if you know anything about history at all. We're a bit uppity and proudly remain so. But they showed up and they said, well, the first question is, do you have a law code? And if not, here's Roman law and Roman religion and Roman everything else. We got smart and said, no, we wrote it down. They weren't pleased. So the ancient parts were written down basically under duress. But the modern parts, and I want you to, if there's nothing else you come away with in sort of Judaism 101, the modern parts of the oral Torah are still in the world. They still grow and live both as commentaries written down and in the life of Jews of the world. That means action, that means work. As to the ancient parts, now written and mostly lost, they are, by tradition, connected back to the revelation on Mount Sinai of the Torah. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, the man who led as a military leader after Moses' death. Joshua to the elders. Who are they? We don't know. The elders to the prophets, we know them. The prophets to the men of the great assembly, the body that governed Jews before the rabbis. They said 3 things. So 3 things we have to do. Be patient in the administration of justice. Teach, meaning raise up many disciples in the world and build a fence around the Torah. In other words, study it and figure out the right way to do things in the world. I'll spare you the list of books in the oral Torah that get written down, but you've heard me quote from the Mishnah, the first one, a commentary a few generations later on that, the Talmud. You'll hear me quote some stories, and I'm going to say this word halachic. Halacha comes from the word halach, to walk. It means the path. It's the Jewish notion of legality. Not you have to do this. It's more the question of how. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. All right. So if we think about what it is to be Jewish in the world, we have to consider how long we've been here as a people. We've had the Torah, first oral and then written, passed and read from generation to generation for thousands of years. Each week, Jews read a parsha, which means a portion or an episode of the Torah, and we have to wrestle with what it means because it's been going around the world for thousands of years. If you read the Bible, and I imagine many of you had because you're in a church, right? These words are simple, often frustratingly simple. They're ancient, and so ancient we barely understand what they mean in the modern world. So we do our best to struggle with them, interpret them. In Judaism, we don't read the Bible, the Torah, we read with the voices and the discoveries of generations that came before us. Our sages have interpreted them according to the rules and outlooks that we try to maintain thousands of years later today. But what are we to make of the ancient words when we ourselves encounter them? More importantly, Jews must ask ourselves, what is the halakha? How do we live correctly and ethically to enact the oral Torah as good works, as righteous deeds and mercies that repair the world as partners and stewards in God's creation? Partners and stewards in God's creation. How many of you does that give a small spiritual panic to be a partner with God? Awesome. Good work. Many people do. But so you have to ask, what gives us the audacious authority over divinely revealed and sacredly transmitted scripture? Judaism traces it to a simple precept, lo bashmaim hi, the matter is not in heaven, from Deuteronomy 29. So now you get your stories. This is the nice thing about having a rabbi. You get stories. And I have to tell you, I've been in Judaism a long time as a practitioner, and in the study of Judaism and teaching of Judaism, a little less time, but quite a long time. I did not know that there is one medieval painting of the story I'm about to tell you, and I am just so thrilled. It's a weird painting. You got hands coming out of the sky, trees flying around, and house walls collapsing. So this will tell you what the principle is I'm talking about. So these rabbis were having an intense, this is the story. The rabbis were having an intense dispute about kashrut, ritual purity, right? Have you heard the word kosher? Okay, so objects, not just food, have ritual purity. So they wanted to know the status of an oven. Isn't that exciting? Down to the minute details of life. And if it could be built somehow to make it immune to ritual impurity. Can you build an oven that's always pure? The point of the story is not the content of their argument, though the fireworks are fun, but it's the disagreements and the flare-ups that teach us what this means. It's not in heaven. This is the story. If somebody cuts an earthenware oven widthwise into segments and places sand between each and every segment, Rabbi Eliezer, he's the first guy you got to remember. So party one, Rabbi Eliezer says it is always ritually pure no matter what you do because it's not an oven. We found a way to do this, right? We put sand between the sections. The entire rest of the Rabbinic Academy said, no, it's an oven. It's a dome, it heats things, it bakes bread, try again. The sages tell us about what happened on that day when they discussed this matter. They grilled Rabbi Eliezer. You ever seen, not televised, but a radio broadcast Supreme Court hearing? This is what the process would have been like. Just every absurd question and test. Rabbi Eliezer answered all the possible questions with good answers in the world to support his opinion. But still, the community said this cut-up oven thing, no. Nuh-uh. So he stands up and he says, if the halakha, the right way to do this, is in accordance with my opinion, that carob tree right there will prove it for me. And then he points at it and it shoots 100 cubits across the room. Some say 400 cubits. The rabbi said to him, well, that's nice, but we don't cite legal arguments from carob trees. So then he said, fine. If this oven decision goes how I think it should go, let all the waters in the streams flow backwards. He points at them, they do. Of course, they say, you can't prove a legal argument from water. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, fine, and he's getting mad now, right? He said, if it's in accordance with me, let the walls of this house of study collapse. So they start leaning in. A third rabbi jumps in and says, Rabbi Yehoshua, which means deliverance, right? So it's like, he's got a name in the story, like, it's what his character is. He's like, no, enough, right? You got to stop. And the reason that the story continues and that the rabbis weren't crushed, including Rabbi Eliezer himself, is because the walls of the house of study had deference both to him and to the rest of the Rabbinic Academy. I think that's funny. Okay. And the Talmud tells us, still to this day, the walls of this house of study remain leaning. Rabbi Eliezer said them, fine. Last argument, if I'm right, let heaven prove it. That's what the hands are coming down. A divine voice emerged from heaven and said, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer? He answered all the questions in the world. Therefore, the halakha, the right way to do this, goes with his opinion everywhere from now on. Rabbi Yehoshua, the one who saved everyone with the walls, stood up and said, no, to God. God's voice. Rabbi Yehoshua said, is it not written in Deuteronomy, the matter is not in heaven? Apparently this ends the episode. There's a pause, and then we learn years later, another rabbi on a little mystical voyage, Rabbi Nathan, encountered the prophet Elijah in heaven, touring around as one does, and he said, by the way, what did the Holy One, blessed be He, that's God's name in heaven, do at that time back then when Rabbi Yehoshua told God to stop talking and issued his declaration? Elijah said to him, the Holy One, blessed be He, smiled and said, how wonderful, my children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me. This is a bit audacious, right? It's here for us to struggle with ancient texts, other generations, and what it means here and now for us to do. So the matter is entirely on us to work out what is good in the first place. On the one hand, to discipline ourselves through studying the right way to do things. On the other, let me tell you a little story first, but let me just say on the other, don't break it, right? Don't fix it if it's not broken. A little story from the early modern world of Jews. Once upon a time, a rabbi, the best rabbi, the most precise, according to those rules we talked about, and dedicated and holy rabbi was walking along the road near the time of prayer. Not at the time of prayer, no, he'd never do that. Just before. So he was shocked, you can imagine, to hear a poor farmer reciting the first 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet over and over while rocking as if he were actually praying. He couldn't be. He couldn't be. It's not even time. Those aren't the right words, thought the horrified rabbi. Over and over, the first 3 letters of the 22 letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Stop, cried the rabbi. What are you doing? What are you doing? The farmer said, I'm praying. The rabbi said, I see that. That's a problem. The rabbi continued to shriek at him. But these are not the prayers of our people, and it's the wrong time. The farmer said, yeah, I know this, but this is the best I could do with all the work I have to do to support my family and to feed this community. All I had time to learn was Aleph, Bet, Gimel, the first 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. I have to believe the angels will take these up to God, make them into other letters, other words, and into the perfect prayers, and please the Holy One. I have to believe this. Nonsense, cried the rabbi. So he set about teaching the farmer, the Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, halachic decision-making, the Midrash, all of the stories we told for thousands of years. And he made this man into a great and precise scholar. One day, at the exact prescribed hour of prayer, he intoned, the former farmer intoned perfectly the prayers of our people. A great cry tore the heavens. The voice of heaven itself shot down into the realm of creation, and God said, I weep. Obviously, the humans were shocked. The rabbi replied, well, we gathered that fact. Master of the universe, said the rabbi, the farmer's prayers were perfect. Why are you not pleased? God said, I weep because you have destroyed what is most precious to me. Because the farmer has lost the innocence of his prior place in the world, and he could not return. So God wept. So we have this phrase, I don't have my glasses on now. I could put them on or just walk forward. Yeah, we have this phrase in Judaism, as I've said, tikkun olam, the repair of the world. Today, it means God, being God's partner in creation, doing good deeds to get things right. But before the 19th century, it meant don't touch things. Keep the social order where the social order is. Keep people where they are. Do good things for them, but don't change the world. That's God's will. So today we have to live in a balance between maintaining it and fixing it and repairing it. This is why good deeds in Judaism require not just good kavanah, by which we mean right intention, right mindset, and an open heart. But this is why we as Jews study. This is why scholarship is as holy as prayer. We're trying to figure out the right way to do things in reference to our past and prior generations. Remember, salvation is the whole people together. We're trying to fix things without breaking them. An important part of why we do this is each of us, as we know from Genesis, are made in the divine form and image. This is ethical in Judaism. When Moses, our teacher, who is the only one, according to Jewish tradition, who spoke to God as a man speaks to his friend, said, "Let me see you," obviously God said, "No, you can't do that and continue to live, and you have more to do." So he put, in Exodus 34, he puts Moses in a rock, right, in a cleft in the rock, and Moses sees God's back, to which he cries out what we call the 13 midot, the 13 measures, by which we try and do things right. This is sort of the filter of how we ask ourselves what is right to do. The Eternal, who is forgiving before we sin. The Eternal, who is forgiving after we sin. God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, faithful, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, forgiving defiance, and granting pardon. We work for tikkun olam, perfecting and not breaking, with this in mind. So this leads us finally to the modern ethical precept from a modern sage of Judaism, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who teaches us how to navigate this tricky balance of not judging and breaking, but rather how to fix things through the process of looking at the world correctly. Hakarat hatov, the recognition of the good. And I've stolen this version of the story from Yehudis Golshevsky because she tells it so well. Once upon a time, a person came to a new community, specifically a Jewish community, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether this person was Jewish by birth, by conversion, by choice, or just liked and benefited from Judaism. It just matters that this person found his or her place in the Jewish community. And of course, this person wanted to learn. So they went to the rabbi. But the rabbi was cold and dismissive. The rabbi was suspicious of this person's Jewishness. Worse, that destructive rabbi managed to find something utterly awful in each member of the community. The fault-finding rabbi became depressed. Of course, he was cut off from the world. So he went to his friend, also a rabbi, and she offered him this advice. If you find fault in others, aren't you just naming the faults in your own heart? Worse, you blind yourself to what you can learn about God, since all humans are in God's likeness and image. If you find the good in others, even the most wicked of people, you are therefore not only finding the good in your own heart, but you are seeing God everywhere in creation. On hearing this, the depressed rabbi's spirits lifted, and he began to look for the good and to learn what to do. So to conclude, computer's over there. There we go. To do righteous deeds, good works, this is what we Jews understand ourselves to have been. Bodies of inert clay and divine incorruptible soul were created. This is the Jewish teaching of human responsibility, the deeper truth of our covenant together as Jews with God, the people Israel, even right now. Finally, it's okay that we aren't there and we know we're not going to get there in our lifetimes. As our Mishnah teaches, you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you ever free to desist from it. As a rabbi, I teach people to take rest and comfort in these words when they are weary of work, and take inspiration when they are ready to take up the task again. So, thank you.